When I stepped off the Greyhound in Portland, all I had was one overpacked suitcase, a dying phone, and a heart so tired it might have stopped beating had I let it that I wasn't running away. Not exactly that I just needed somewhere else to be, anywhere that wasn't Indiana, with its dusty sidewalks and people who knew too much and cared too little. Portland wasn't a plan. It was a map pin I chose at random during a 2 a.m. Google search while lying on my friend's couch, staring at a ceiling that didn't belong to me, and now I was here. 24. Alone. Broke. Starting over. Again, Portland greeted me with gray skies and soft rain. I found a tiny Craigslist room in a house with creaky floorboards, for cats, and a roommate named Sarah who wore mismatched socks and talked to her plants that I didn't mind. I just needed space to breathe. That my first job was at a coffee shop called Wren's Nest. I lied on my application, said I'd worked barista gigs before. In truth, I'd only made Keurig coffee for my boss at the medical clinic back in Indiana. But the manager, Theo, was too kind or too tired to care that he hired me anyway. There's something oddly comforting about a city that doesn't know your name. You can cry in grocery aisles or smile at strangers and no one will ask why. Everyone's too wrapped up in their own mess. That first month, I cried often. Quietly. On park benches. In bathroom stalls. While folding laundry. No one noticed, but something about the trees here, tall and swaying like they'd seen worse things, made me feel a little less alone. It started with coffee, always does, right? He ordered a black drip, no sugar, no milk, and sat in the same corner seat every Tuesday and Friday. Wore the same faded green jacket, scuffed boots, and looked like he belonged to an old photograph. Mysterious in that book cover kind of way that I noticed him. Of course I did, but I didn't say a word. Not until the fourth week, when I accidentally handed him a mocha instead of his usual. You trying to change me? He said, smiling. I smiled back. You look like you could use a little sugar. His name was Jack, not John or Jackson or anything fancy. Just Jack. He was a mechanic, worked at a small auto shop on Alberta Street. Said he liked coffee shops because they felt like living rooms, except with better music and people who didn't expect you to fix their brakes. I told him I was from Indiana. He said, I can hear it in the way you say, coffee. And just like that, I stopped feeling like a stranger in this city. Jack and I never called it a friendship. We didn't call it anything. He'd come in, we'd talk, sometimes we'd walk around the block when I got off work. He'd carry my umbrella and make fun of how I always tripped on uneven sidewalks. Sometimes, he'd leave me little things, a book he thought I'd like, a mixtape on a USB stick, a pack of my favorite gum. We didn't talk about our pasts. I liked that, but I knew he carried weight. The kind that shows in how a person's eyes sometimes dim, even when they smile. I moved again, this time into a small studio apartment near 82nd Avenue, above a nail salon. It smelled like acetone and fried food, but it was mine. My own light switch. My own window. My own silence. I bought a second-hand couch and thrift store plates. I started painting again, not well, but honestly. I'd forgotten what it felt like to create without someone judging it. Jack helped me hang shelves. Stayed late once, long after we'd finished, just sitting on the floor listening to my old records. He never tried to kiss me. I never asked why. Sometimes, depression doesn't knock. It just lets itself in. One morning, I couldn't get out of bed. Not because I was sick. Just, heavy. Like gravity got stronger overnight. I called in sick. Turned my phone face down. Jack came by that evening with takeout and didn't ask any questions. Just sat on the edge of my couch and told me about a car he worked on, an old '76 Mustang with a stubborn engine and a leather seat that smelled like someone's grandfather. He made me laugh. He stayed until I fell asleep. It was a Saturday when I first saw the photograph. Jack had left his jacket on the back of the cafe chair. He never did that. It slipped to the floor when I was clearing his table, and as I picked it up, an old photo peeked out of the inside pocket. It was worn, like it had been folded 1,000 times. A woman with sunlit eyes, holding a toddler on her hip. Jack looked different in it, younger, wilder, almost unrecognizable. I didn't mean to look. But I stared too long. That afternoon, he didn't show up. For the first time in weeks, and I couldn't stop wondering, was she his wife? The kid, his. When Jack returned 3 days later, I didn't ask about the photo. He didn't mention his absence, either. Just ordered coffee and sat across from me like nothing happened, but something had shifted. He looked tired. Older, somehow. You okay? I asked. He shrugged. Long weekend. That was all. Later that night, I painted for hours, using red and gray, colors I hadn't touched in years. Something inside me was stirring, but I didn't know what it was yet. Grief? Longing? Maybe the beginnings of something I was afraid to name. Fall in Portland is messy and beautiful. Yellow leaves clog gutters. The rain gets colder, more serious. The city starts wearing its gray coat full-time. Jack and I spent more time together, sometimes walking in silence, sometimes talking until midnight. There were nights we sat on my fire escape eating cheap Chinese food, watching the city flicker. I told him about my dad, how he left when I was 12. How I stopped trusting people after that. How Indiana was full of ghosts. He told me his mother died when he was 21. She was the only person who ever really saw me. He said that we didn't hug. We didn't cry, but I think, in that moment, we saw each other. We had a routine, Tuesdays and Fridays, Wren's Nest, Sundays, my apartment, records, tea, and silence, random Thursdays, his garage, watching him fix cars while I read old magazines and offered unhelpful advice. One night in November, I leaned against his shoulder while we listened to a scratchy jazz record. He didn't move. I didn't breathe. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't love. Not yet, but it felt like standing on the edge of something warm, almost. December is when everything changes. My boss, Theo, said he was moving to Chicago. You've got the heart for this place, he told me. Think you can manage it? I laughed. Me? Manage a coffee shop? He didn't laugh back. Jack was quiet that week. Distant. He'd stare at his coffee like it was holding secrets. You ever wish you could just disappear? He asked one night. All the time. I said, yeah. He whispered, almost to himself. But some people don't let you. Christmas came early in Portland. Snow, rare and chaotic, fell for 2 days straight. The city panicked. So did I. Sarah moved out. Said she was going back to Utah. Left me a note and 2 houseplants. Jack didn't call. So I walked. In the snow. Past shuttered shops and flickering lights. Until I found myself outside his garage. He wasn't there. But the door was unlocked. Inside, I found the photo again. This time taped to a wall beside a bunch of handwritten notes. Names. Dates. I backed away. He walked in. You weren't supposed to see that, he said quietly. That night, I learned the truth. The woman in the photo, her name was Claire. She was Jack's sister. The boy? Her son. Jack's nephew. Claire was gone. Overdose. 2 years ago, Jack had tried to get custody of the boy, but it got messy. Courts. Family drama. The kid was with a foster family now. One Jack wasn't allowed to contact. He kept that photo as his anchor. I thought I could rebuild something, he said. Be better. But I don't even know who I am without her. I didn't say anything. I just took his hand. Love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it's a slow drift, a quiet unfolding. Like leaves falling one by one until the branch is bare and beautiful. Jack and I didn't say the word love. Not for weeks. Not even after he kissed me in my apartment, gently, like asking permission from something bigger than both of us, but I knew. In the way he tucked my hair behind my ear. In how he remembered which side of the bed I hated. I loved him, and I was terrified. By late January, I was managing Wren's Nest. Full dash time. It wasn't glamorous. But I loved it. People knew my name. They trusted me. I made playlists and painted the menu board and organized community nights. It felt like mine. Then came the email. An old coworker from Indiana, Laura, told me her clinic was hiring. Admin position. Better pay. Health insurance. Security. I stared at the screen for hours. I didn't tell Jack. Not yet. I told him 2 days later. He didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, so you'd go back? I shrugged. It's just a job offer. You'd leave all this? This wasn't supposed to be permanent, Jack. That hurt him. I saw it, but he didn't fight. Do what you need to do, he said. turning away that I didn't take the job, not because of Jack. Not because of fear, because for the first time in years, I felt like me, this city, this strange gray Portland. It held me when I had nothing. It gave me a place to land, a reason to get up, a quiet kind of hope that I wasn't ready to give that up. That I wrote Laura a kind email, then I went to Jack's garage. That he was under a car, grease on his hands, tired eyes. That I knelt beside him. Portland has better coffee, I said. That he smirked. That I leaned in. I'm staying. He didn't say, I love you, he didn't need to. I saw it in the way he looked at me, like I was the first clear morning after 1,000 storms, like I was home. Staying wasn't the end of the storm. Some days, I still woke up heavy. Jack did too. He didn't always say it, but I could feel the weight in his silences. There were days I messed up the shop's order or burned the scones. Days Jack came home angry from the shop, smelling like oil and frustration. But that's the thing they don't tell you about real life, that it's not a perfect line. That it curves and backtracks. It gets loud, then quiet. But if you're lucky, really lucky, someone sticks around through it. That it came in February. That a plain white envelope in Jack's mailbox. Official looking. From the Oregon Department of Human Services. That he didn't open it at first. Just held it. Stared at it like it might explode. That I didn't press him, but later, sitting on the edge of my bed, he handed it to me. They're letting me write to him, he said. His voice cracked. His nephew, Caleb. 8 years old now. Maybe I'm not out of chances, Jack whispered. Jack started writing letters. .1 every week. Never too long. Just simple things, stories about cars, what the rain smelled like, his favorite memory of Claire. That he never got a reply, but he kept writing. Sometimes I'd catch him rereading them. Softly, like prayers. That I started writing too, to myself, mostly. In a journal I bought from Powell's. Notes about the people who came into Wren's nest. What they ordered. What they wore. Life felt fuller when I paid attention. That in March, my mom called. That we hadn't spoken in over a year. I heard you're managing a coffee shop, she said. Her voice had that brittle tone, like she didn't know whether to be proud or disappointed. That I didn't say much, but a week later, she showed up. With a roller suitcase and a cardigan she'd owned since I was 15. She stayed for 2 days. We went to the farmer's market. She met Jack. When she left, she hugged me too tightly and whispered, "You seem okay." It was the best compliment she ever gave me. Spring arrived like a whisper. Blossoms. Light jackets. The return of sun-drenched sidewalks. Business at the shop picked up. Jack started working fewer hours and more on old car restorations in the garage behind his house. That we fell into a rhythm. Friday night tacos, Sunday record listening, occasional fights about dishes or timing or silence, but through it all, we stayed. That's what mattered. One evening, Jack put a new photo on my fridge. That it was of him and Caleb. Years ago. A park bench, juice boxes, matching baseball caps. "You think he remembers me?" he asked quietly. I think he never forgot. He didn't reply, just touched the photo once, gently, then walked away. That I used to think love was dramatic, like in the books, heartbreak and passion and grand speeches in the rain, but real love is different. Quieter. That it's Jack making me toast when I'm sick. It's me knowing which wrench he needs without asking. It's lying side by side, not saying a word, and not needing to. It's surviving the ordinary together, and still choosing each other. It came on a Thursday. A letter addressed to Jack. This time, from Caleb. It was short. Printed in blocky, kid handwriting. "Dear Uncle Jack, my new family says it's okay if we write. I remember the monster truck show. Do you still have that hat? Caleb." Jack didn't cry, but I did. 1 year in Portland. 12 months since the bus. Since the suitcase. Since the aching silence. I threw a tiny party at the cafe. Balloons. Cupcakes. A hand-drawn sign that said, "Here's to staying." Sarah came back, just for the weekend. Theo sent flowers from Chicago, and Jack, he gave me a key to the garage, he said, smiling. And maybe, the rest of me, too. I still don't have it all figured out. Some mornings are harder than others. Some days the silence creeps in, but most days, I'm okay. Portland still rains. The cats next door still fight at night. The coffee machine still sputters when it's tired, but I've got roots here now. Not deep. Not perfect, but real. I live above a nail salon. I run a coffee shop. I love a man who writes letters and fixes broken things. And sometimes, when the city sleeps and the wind hums through the fire escape, I feel like I've finally arrived, not at the end, but at a beginning I chose. The coffee shop smelled like cinnamon and early summer. A man played soft guitar in the corner, sunlight spilled through the dusty front windows, and everything felt still. The kind of stillness you only get after surviving something big. It had been a year since I got off that bus in Portland with a suitcase and a heart held together by dental floss, and I was okay, more than okay. Actually, Stor1es nest was mine now, legally. Theo had signed the papers in April, handed me the keys, and cried harder than I did. Business was good. Locals called me by name. Jack and I had grown into each other like vines on an old fence. Twisted. Intertwined. Stronger than we looked, and Caleb, Jack's 10-year-old nephew, had been living with us for almost 4 months now. That's where the cracks started showing. Caleb didn't talk much. He liked mechanical things, puzzles, toy trucks, the broken coffee grinder in the back room. He took it apart in under 10 minutes, then put it back together better than it had ever worked, but he didn't like strangers. Or loud voices. Or being touched. Some nights I'd hear him crying into his pillow. Not sobbing, just a long, held-in kind of grief. The kind I recognized too well. Jack tried hard. Too hard, sometimes, that he wanted to be everything, uncle, father, savior, and I could feel him unraveling. One night, Jack didn't come home. I texted. Called. Nothing. He came through the door just after midnight, his jaw tight, hands greasy. I needed to drive. He said that I didn't ask questions, but in the morning, I found a letter on the kitchen table. It was from Caleb's biological father. Prison postmark. 2 pages long. I didn't read it, but Jack did, and after that, something changed in him. She came into Stor1es nest on a Wednesday, black leather jacket. Silver ring on every finger. Long scar across her cheek like someone had tried to erase her face and failed. She ordered a black coffee and stared at me too long. You're the one with Jack Monroe, she said. I paused. Who's asking? She didn't answer. Just left $100 bill on the counter and walked out. I watched her go, heart pounding. Jack had never told me about a woman like her, but I had a feeling she wasn't someone you forget. Jack didn't like people in his garage. It was his sanctuary, oil-stained, tool-cluttered, always half-dark. But that night, I found a key taped under the sink with my name on it. He was out. Again. I went, and inside, I found more than tools. There were folders. Stacks of them. Documents, photos, letters. One folder was labeled with my name, another said Liam Monroe. Jack's brother. Caleb's father, the man in prison. I shouldn't have read it, but I did. Inside were newspaper clippings, court transcripts, a restraining order. Jack had lied that he hadn't just tried to get custody of Caleb, he'd fought for it after testifying against Liam in a violent crime case. One that nearly killed someone. And that woman? The one with the scar, she was the victim, and Jack, he'd been there that night. When Jack got home, I didn't say anything at first. He kissed my temple like nothing had changed. Sat on the couch. Asked if Caleb ate dinner, then I handed him the folder. He didn't even flinch. You weren't supposed to see that, he said, just like he had the night I found the photo of Claire. I waited. You want the whole truth? He asked. It's not pretty. I'm not afraid of ugly, I said, but I was. A little. He told me everything. 5 years ago. A bar fight. His brother Liam high on something. A woman, the one with the scar, caught in the middle. Jack had pulled Liam off her, called the cops. He testified. Liam got 10 years, and Jack, he'd been paying for it ever since. She was his girl, Jack said. And mine, once. I blinked. You were with her? Before the drugs. Before everything. I couldn't breathe for a second. And Caleb? I asked. Jack swallowed hard. I thought he might be mine once. But I did a test. He's not. The next few days, I moved through fog. Jack tried to act normal. Caleb played with a plastic dinosaur in the corner. The coffee shop kept humming, but my heart was louder than all of it, not because he lied, but because I wasn't sure what else he was still hiding, and because that woman, her name was Nora, came back, and this time, She didn't come for coffee, she came to tell me the truth that we met at a park bench behind the cafe. I'm not here to take him, she said. Not the kid. Not Jack. Then what do you want? She looked away. I want to know why he told you I was just a victim. I froze. What? Because that night? It wasn't just Liam. She pulled up her sleeve. Scars. More of them. You think you know who you're sleeping next to. But you don't. I didn't want to believe her. I didn't want to believe that Jack, my Jack, had done anything worse than tell a few half-truths to protect a boy and bury a past. But when Nora spoke, it wasn't with bitterness that it was with sorrow. He didn't hit me, she said, but he didn't stop it either. Not really. He froze. Watched it happen until it was almost too late. He broke it up, yeah, and he called 911. But I saw his face. He hesitated. That doesn't make him guilty, I whispered. It makes him someone who wants to forget he was a coward. Then she stood up, wiped her palms on her jeans. Just know who you're building a future with. That night I didn't ask Jack anything, but I couldn't look him in the eye. That I lay next to him in bed, every breath tight and shallow. That I wanted to scream. Not because I thought he was a monster, but because I understood that I knew what it felt like to freeze. To watch something terrible happen and be unable to stop it. That I didn't want to admit it, but I knew there were parts of Jack I'd romanticized. Parts one wanted to believe were invincible, but love doesn't erase a person's past. That it only makes the truth harder to swallow. The next morning, Caleb was quiet at breakfast. That he poked at his cereal, then looked up and asked, "Is my dad still in jail?" Jack stiffened. I held my breath. "Yes," he said carefully. Caleb nodded, then added, "Did he hurt people?" Neither of us answered for a moment. Then Jack said, "Yeah. He did. But it wasn't your fault." Caleb didn't say anything else, just got up and fed the cat. 10 years old, and already learning the language of silence, Jack left a note for me on the kitchen table. Just 3 words: ask me anything. No signature. No explanation. That I stared at it for hours. Then, finally, that night, I did. That I asked about Nora. That I asked what he saw, and I asked what he didn't do. That he didn't cry. He didn't defend himself. I stood there, he said. And in the worst second of her life, I didn't move fast enough. I nodded, and I believed him, but that didn't make it easier. That in late June, Jack got a call. Caleb's caseworker again. They were offering full custody. Permanent. No more check-ins. No more evaluations, but only under one condition: we had to move to a smaller town 2 hours south. Safer neighborhood. Better schools. The agency wanted a clean environment, away from Liam's past connections in Portland. That meant selling the shop, leaving everything. Jack stared at me across the dinner table. I won't say yes unless you want to. And in that moment, my heart broke in a completely new way, because for the first time, I realized I didn't know the answer. A week later, Nora sent me a letter. That I hadn't spoken to her since the park bench, but she left it at the cafe, sealed in a brown envelope, addressed only for her. Inside was a single page. I don't hate him. That I never did, but he needs to stop pretending he's the hero in his story. You can love him. Just make sure he learns to carry his truth, too, and don't lose yourself to fix him. That he's not broken. He's just not whole. And I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and tucked it inside my journal. Portland rained in July. That never happens. That it felt like the sky was confused, like I was. That I walked around the city for hours, past the bookstore where I met Theo. Past the park where Jack kissed me under fading light. Past the corner where I sat with one suitcase and no idea what would happen next. That I thought about the girl I used to be, and I realized, she still lived inside me, but she wasn't calling the shots anymore. That we sat on the floor that night, Caleb asleep in the next room. The cat curled between us. One lamp on. The kind of quiet that feels like it's listening. I can't leave this city, I said. Jack didn't blink. I thought you might say that. You can, I added. You can take him. I won't stop you. His face broke. You think I'd leave you? I think you'd do anything for him. He exhaled. Slow. Shaky, and then he said the one thing I wasn't ready for. I asked Nora to write you. She didn't come to the shop by accident, Jack said. I asked her to. I needed her to tell you everything I was too afraid to say. I stared at him. Why? Because if you were going to stay, I wanted it to be with open eyes. I swallowed hard, and if I'd left, then you would have been right too. I didn't cry, but something inside me cracked open out of quiet grief. A sharp kind of love, because that's what real love looks like sometimes, not fixing. Not saving, just offering the truth, even if it costs you everything. That we didn't move, that we fought for Caleb to stay. Got a lawyer. Wrote letters. Gathered testimonies, and somehow, miraculously, we won. They let him stay, but Jack sold the garage anyway. Too many memories, he said. Too many ghosts. That he started teaching automotive repair part-time at a community college, and I stayed with Wren's Nest, not because it was easy, but because it was home. By September, things looked okay again. Jack was adjusting to teaching. Caleb had started school, still guarded, but slowly opening up. He'd made a friend named Elias who loved model trains and had a pet lizard. The house felt more stable. Less like we were standing on a fault line, but the thing about calm is, it never lasts. That I could feel it coming. That a subtle shift in the air. That a quiet before. That he was supposed to be in prison for 10 years, but systems fail, and Liam Monroe walked out on parole in the second week of October. That we found out when a woman knocked on our door. She was with DHS, someone new, someone apologetic, holding a clipboard and a look I didn't like. He has a right to request visitation, she said. Jack didn't speak. That he just stared at her, jaw clenched so tight I thought he might break his own teeth. Liam didn't want custody. That he wanted a meeting with Caleb, supervised, in a neutral setting. 1 hour. I want to see my son, he wrote in his request. Jack paced the kitchen all night. I can't let that happen, he kept saying, but legally? We had no ground to stop it. That we could only be there. Hold the space. Try to protect Caleb from a man he hadn't seen since he was 5. When we told Caleb, he didn't cry. That he just asked, will you be there too? And I said, every second. It was in a government building. Windowless. Beige walls. A social worker sat in the corner. Liam looked smaller than I expected, thinner. Unshaven. Eyes like wet gravel. Caleb walked in holding Jack's hand, and I swear the world stopped breathing. Liam didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just said, hey, kiddo. Caleb stared at him, then said, I like dinosaurs now. Not trucks. It was a strange sentence, but honest, and Jack's hand tightened around mine. Liam didn't say much. That he asked questions. What's your school like? Do you like to draw? Caleb answered some. Not all. After 45 minutes, he stood up, walked to Jack, and whispered, can we go now? Jack nodded, and Caleb turned to Liam and said, I already have a dad. That night, Jack sat on the porch alone for hours. When I brought him tea, he whispered, I don't deserve him. And I said, you didn't have to. Late October. Rain hitting the roof like 1,000 tiny fists. That we got the call at 11:14 p.m. Liam had overdosed. That he was found alone, in a cheap motel, surrounded by nothing but painkillers and a photograph of Caleb folded in half. Jack didn't cry. That he didn't speak. That he just stood there in the kitchen, shaking, quiet, wrecked in a way that made my heart split open. I hated him, he said. And I still didn't want this. After the funeral, a silent, barely attended thing, Jack disappeared for 2 days. No text. No call. Nothing. When he finally came back, he looked like someone who'd walked through fire barefoot. I went to where we grew up, he said. To our old house. It's abandoned now. He handed me a photo, him and Liam. Teenagers. Covered in dirt and engine grease. I keep asking myself what would have happened if I stayed. If I hadn't run when I did. You wouldn't have saved him, I said softly. No, he agreed. But maybe I'd be less afraid of who I am now. It arrived in early November. A letter addressed to Jack, written by Claire, his sister, 6 months before she died. That she'd given it to a friend for safekeeping. That friend found Jack through social media. In it, Claire wrote. Don't raise Caleb like you were raised. Don't run from grief, walk through it, let someone love you, even when it feels impossible, especially then. Jack read it 3 times, then folded it into his wallet, and hasn't taken it out since. One night, I sat alone on the fire escape with a glass of red wine and the sound of downtown humming below me, and I realized something I hadn't before. Jack wasn't my home, Caleb wasn't either. I'd spent so long trying to be their anchor, their shield, their gravity, I forgot to look at the girl who showed up in this city with nothing but a suitcase and a broken sense of hope, and she was still here, more whole than ever. Caleb's laugh echoed from the living room. Jack was in the kitchen, singing along, terribly, to an old rock song, and me, I was writing again. Pages and pages of truth. About grief. About stillness. About breaking, and rebuilding, because the quiet isn't something that always brings peace, sometimes it just hides what needs to be said, but when you finally speak, when the silence breaks, you realize you were never alone in it, not really.